So good afternoon. I'm Bob McNeil. I've heard my name mentioned several times here, but I want to say right off that this exhibit would not have happened without the help of a lot of people. And I'm going to, first of all, I want to thank the Exhibits Committee of Fredericton Region Museum for accepting this as a project. Without their financial and moral support, the exhibit would not be possible. The Heritage Branch of provincial government was very generous in their grant, and I wish to thank them as well. The people of Maugerville and Sheffield were very kind in giving their time and information to help in the research. Louise Hill's estate, through Catherine Labatt, allowed me to use Miss Hill's book on Maugerville, which she wrote in 1963, as a starting point for the research. The museum staff and volunteers were very helpful in getting the exhibit organized. The Johnson Avenue Senior Center designed and built the barn model, which is the centerpiece of the exhibit. There are many people involved, and I hesitate to mention names because I don't want to leave anybody out. Let it suffice to say that I wish to thank all who had part to bring this day to fruition. Now, because I'm a teacher, I can't let you away without a little history lesson. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Maugerville, Sheffield. The first introduction I had to the New England planters of Maugerville, Sheffield was through information I researched on John Anderson. Now, you may not know that name, but John Anderson had a grant of land at the mouth of the Nashwauk River in 1763. It seems that John Anderson was a loyal British subject and a justice of the peace. He ran a trading post, and he traded with the Maliseet Indians in the neighborhood. John Anderson's son claims that his father was imprisoned by the local rebel committee of Maugerville during the American Revolution, resulting in the ruination of his business. Now, how did a bunch of peaceful farmers, mostly from Raleigh, Massachusetts, openly take up arms against the British Empire? If we look into the background, we will discover the planters were of Puritan stock. Their ancestors left England to get their religious freedom and had come to the New World about 1620. By 1763, the descendants of these Puritans were looking for a new frontier to settle. The Western settlement was blocked at that time, so when the 7 Years' War drew to a close, land on the St. John River became available, and they came east to this part. So 250 years ago, the New England planters, with the assistance of Francis Peabody and Israel Purley, began a settlement which they called Peabody on the banks of the St. John River, 70 miles from the settlement of St. John, which was at the mouth of the river. It was fortunate that St. John was settled by the New England merchants Simons, Hazen, and White, as friendships and trading soon commenced between the two communities. Matter of fact, Captain Peabody's two daughters married James Simon and James White. The community changed its name from Peabody to Maugerville because of the efforts of a man called Joshua Major. Major was from the Isle of Jersey in the English Channel. He had traded in Nova Scotia and had returned to England to become an agent for the Nova Scotia government in the British Parliament. When the British government decided to settle disbanded soldiers in the St. John River Valley instead of the New England farmers, Major interceded and secured the grants for the planters. For his help, they named the community after him, and giving it a name which few outsiders can pronounce very well. The planters were of the Congregationalist religion, and they soon formed a church on their arrival on the St. John River. They pledged, and this is in quotations, to discharge the duties of Christian love and brotherly watchfulness, and in joining together and maintaining the public worship of God. In the Puritan sense, brotherly watchfulness could often mean being called before the elders for what they might call a petty offense, for what we might call a petty offense. In fact, a young girl was called before the elders for wearing a ribbon in her hair. This would probably fall under the sin of pride. The girl defended herself by saying that she had made a dress and trimmed it with a ribbon, and so not to be wasteful, she used the ribbon in her hair. She was let off with a warning. From 1763 until 1775, the community of Maugerville grew and prospered. It was the center of the settlements along the river in what was in the Sunbury County of Nova Scotia. Much trade was conducted with St. John, court was held, and they were allowed to send 2 representatives to the Nova Scotia legislature. Their land grants were secure, and they had their religious freedom. However, the opening events of the American Revolution sent shock waves that were felt along the St. John River Valley. Disruption of trade, raids along the coast, and other attacks drove the settlers inland. The planters at Maugerville were caught in a very difficult position of deciding where their loyalties were. Should they side with their close friends and relatives in Massachusetts, or stay with the British, under whose jurisdiction they were? The local preacher Seth Noble and the American patriots John Allen and Jonathan Eddy convinced them to side with the rebels. So a resolution was sent to Massachusetts to the effect that a march that they would side with Washington and the rebels of the 13 colonies. And a march was planned on the British Fort Cumberland on the Tantramar Marshes. In the end, the Americans were more interested in Quebec than they were in the colonies to the east. The attack on Fort Cumberland failed. The British forces demanded the planters take an oath of allegiance, and so they did, because they weren't crazy. They knew that that was their best thing to do. And the main rebels who were sympathizers with the Americans fled. The province of Nova Scotia is very interested in the New England planters, because they had a lot of New England planters in their Annapolis Valley. They've done studies, and they've studied the history extensively. Why have we not given more recognition to the New England planters of New Brunswick as a founding group? The Peabodys, Purleys, Pickards, Stickneys, Burpees, Bridges, Estes, Barkers, Jewetts, Brewers, Coys, Clarks, Dunphys, Hoyts, Rideout, Saunders, Tapleys, Nevers, Nobles, as well as other names, are spread around our province and beyond. And many people, probably some sitting right in front of me here, are related to those people. Their origins have largely been forgotten, except for the family genealogies of those who have researched their descendants. By 1784, they were vastly outnumbered by the arriving Loyalists. They were probably eager to forget their rebel sympathies, and so became involved in starting new settlements in the province. They took their place as leaders in commerce, education, and government. Many of the planters' descendants became prominent citizens. Eventually, the planters became assimilated into the general English population. On the 250th anniversary of their settlement in Maugerville, it is necessary for us to recognize their contributions to the province as the first English farming community on the St. John River. So we are here today to celebrate the success of the New English planters' influence on our province. I hope you enjoy the exhibit after 250 years, and we can give the planters a rightful place in our history. And at this point, I now move that the New England Planters of Maugerville and Sheffield exhibit be open for your information and viewing pleasure. And I also invite you to tour around the museum and visit some of the other exhibits we have in the museum. Thank you very much for your time and attention.